It's 15 after, so why don't we go ahead and get started. Alex, kick it off.
Thank you very much, Nick. Yep. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along. This talk is going to be about, well, in general, about what we've been doing as a development team with the IATI technical team over the last 6 months or so since the last VCE, with particular focus on the IATI Unified Platform, because that's what we've been doing over the last 6 months. My name's Alex Lydiate, and it'll be myself and my colleague Nick Osvalds who are talking, and I shall kick off. And then later on, Nick will give you a practical demonstration, which will be fun to see. So Nick, if you could slide me forward, please. Let me just quit Slack, which is beeping me, and that will be no good at all. Here is a slide. Please make sure your Zoom display name includes your full name and organization. I'm sure you all know the drill now. If you could slide me forward from here, please. Thank you. So this is what we'd like to talk about. First off, I'll talk about the Unified Platform, and then I'll go on to talk a little bit about the API Gateway, and then I'll hand over to Nick, and he'll discuss the Public Validator API, which is now a thing, live upon the World Wide Web, and as part of the Validator V2. Then we'll come back, discuss a little bit about our future plans, and then if there's time, we'll take a few questions. Next slide, please. So the IATI Unified Platform, what it is. So I'll give a little bit of history here for those of you who may not know the history of it. Last summer, there was a thing. This is just after I started. I started in March of last year. And just after that, we had an exercise called Technical Stocktake, where a gentleman called Dan Hughes did a lot of work, a lot of research, and a lot of interviews to think about the technical estate that we had and how we might move forward with it technically and in a positive way. And he came up with 3 key recommendations, which IATI took on board, which was that we should have a unified platform for what were at that point a lot of tools in a lot of different locations. So on different platforms, we had it on AWS, VPS.net, Google, and others that I'm forgetting, but there were a lot of different platforms. And they were all doing their own thing. So they'd all be providing a service, but there was no shared resources between them. So that's in terms of server resources, but also in terms of code repeating themselves in various different ways. And so the recommendation was that we'd move to a microservice architecture so that those different services could share code and resources, and then use an API gateway to allow single access to all publicly available IATI APIs. And this is what we've been doing essentially. So we took that on, we were instructed to implement that, which we did. We started off in January of this year, roughly speaking, with the implementation. And then we talked about it, and we had got thus far by that point, the last VCE. And we said that we were aiming for September, which we made. So as of September, the Unified Platform is live, and that is the platform itself. It has on board the version 2 of the validator with the Public Validator API. And that is the first public validator, which, the first public API, which is accessed via the API gateway. So what this has given us is that it is efficient. IATI documents are synced from the registry by a single centralized process. So whether it be the validator at the moment, shortly the data store, and any other application that goes on the platform, they'll all use that service to get and utilize IATI data. Separate services process in a pipeline. These are decoupled and concurrent, and each are configurable to run with any number of parallel processes. So at the moment, we have a process which does the downloading of IATI data, checks for updates, and keeps that fresh. We then have a process which validates, and soon enough we'll have another process which flattens that data into something which can be indexed by Solr. Another process which splits that data up into individual activities to put into a data lake so we can bring XML back very quickly. And another process which indexes it into Solr. Again, that's the future, that's the data store API, which I'll come on to. That allows them to be independent from each other, decoupled, so if one falls over, it doesn't affect the rest. And they're very resilient. You can turn them off in any way you like, and they will bring themselves back up and won't affect anything else along the pipeline. And then each one is designed to run within itself concurrently with any number of processes. So, for example, the sync process at the moment has 10 processes running, meaning we're simultaneously downloading 10 documents at any one point in time. We could expand that out to as much as we like. The things that would limit that would be the resource. Obviously, we'd have to provide it more resource, though you can. But also in terms of that particular one, you wouldn't want to be operating a kind of accidental denial of service on lots of publisher services. So we need to be careful, the extent to which we start polling things, really. But them being in that framework that we can add processes as we go means that IATI, being the dynamic environment that it is, if, let's say, in 2 years' time, there are twice as many documents, 3 times as many publishers, we can scale this system up accordingly and be able to handle that. And then we have other services that provide utility interfaces, for example, the Validate. And I'll come on to this in a little bit, actually. I've got a slide about the architecture later, which will be a bit clearer. It's consistent. The same documents and metadata are used by all dependent applications. And it's stable and resilient. So it's a framework for all future IATI technical team developed products, and also an API platform for other IATI applications. Nick, if you could slide me on, please. And the unified platform, what it will be, so that's what it is. What it is at the moment is the platform, Validator version 2 with its public API behind the API gateway. Coming soon to the platform, we are concentrating now on the data store API, which will be analogous to the version 2 data store API. And then next along the line will be the dashboard and publish the statistics, which is sort of our last application, which is on an outlier that's sitting on VPS.net at the moment, and is the last server running there, and will on occasion fall over because I think they're running their stuff in Manchester and occasionally it sets fire and you have to call them up and say, put the fire out because we've lost our services. So that'll be good bringing that in. And then also there's an idea to rebuild front ends to a common architecture. At the moment, really, the front end on the unified platform is the Validator version 2 front end. The Validator version 2, the back end is an entirely ground up rebuild. The front end is an adaptation of the version 1 front end. And one way or another, we're not entirely sure which direction we'll go with this. It might be Angular, which that is at the moment. It might be React. It might be Vue. We haven't made that decision yet. We'd like to settle on a platform, settle on a framework, and then be able to use, in a similar way as we do in the back end, be able to use reusable components on the front end. So we're not reinventing the wheel every time we want to build a new web application. Next slide, please, Nick. This is the architecture slide I was talking about. So I won't go into too much detail here, but I will give you a quick overview of the unified platform's architecture. So you will see at the top end, there's a big dotted line, and that big dotted line represents the boundary of the unified platform with the rest of the internet. So anything above are things making calls to the platform. Anything below is the actual unified platform. Unified platform is built on Azure, and it could have been built on AWS. It could have been built on Google, but Azure gave us funding essentially through a non-profit fashion. And so that's what swung us in that direction. It's very good. To be honest, they're all very good. You can do it on any. They all have very similar similar features. So as you come down from the internet, you'll see the API gateway. So the idea being any calls made to the platform will go through the API gateway. And that gives us a few advantages. It gives us the advantage of being able to put checks and balances in so that we don't end up with any sort of accidental denial of service attacks on us, which has happened in the past where, you know, with the best intention of the world, somebody's written a script and that script has decided to run 1,000 requests, you know, a second or something, and they've left it going overnight, and then some server will fall over. So we can put rate limiting, things like that, through the API gateway. We can also, and this is going to be really important for us, use it for a lot of analytics. And that's something I think has been missing from the stack up until this point. The ability to be able to look and go, right, well, we're getting this number of requests from this sort of area of the world. They're calling these routes. They're doing it at this time of day. And things like they're calling this, maybe we see they're calling route A and then route B. And we can see a repeated pattern, route A, route B, route A, route B. And we can see that's happened 1,000 times in a month from, you know, a handful of users. Then we might be thinking, we can probably provide them a better service than this. Instead of them calling route A and route B repeatedly, maybe we make route C. And route C at the back end calls route A, route B, but they're only going to one endpoint. So it's going to save us network, and it's going to save them time and complexity in their application. So that kind of analytics will be great. And then if you come down with your eyes to the next level, that's the application layer. On the left-hand side, there's a Python application which handles the download, modification, and deletion of IATI documents as instructed by the registry. And then that manages the pipeline of validation and subsequent load into the various data storages. So that when I was talking about the sync, validate, flatten, lakeify, index, those are our 5 microservices on that side, all running from the same code base, but all handling that pipeline of processing documents from when we first see it right way through to eventually when it will be in the data store. We're hoping to meet a service level there of within 24 hours for any given document. We can do it at the moment with the present documentation, although for one reason or another, we went from about 8,500 IATI documents to 13,000, with one publisher getting very excited, bringing 4,000 into the mix on one go. But we can do that now well within a day from zero. So from just pressing go on the system to bring it all down to having it into an instance of Solar, all of them validated. I think we're talking about 16 hours really. And you wouldn't have to do that on a daily basis, of course, you're only looking for changes. Then on the right-hand side, it's the service application. So things to do, things like to validate, which Nick will be talking about later on. That provides a simple API that you send it an IATI document. It sends you back a validation report. It's the same service which drives the public API, exactly the same as we use internally. Simple, efficient, and on a serverless platform, so it can run concurrently to a large degree. I mean, we should be able to happily support any demand that we have. And again, it's scalable, so if we can't, we can always put more resource behind it. And then at the bottom is permanent storage. Actually, I've missed out one there. There is also a data lake. So it's Azure storage. It's analogous to AWS S3, where we keep all activities in individual files, so we can index by the IATI identifier, so we can pull them out quickly. There's a Postgres server which handles knowledge of the pipeline and also keeps flattened documents in there, so we can pump them back into Solar. Should Solar end up falling over, and spoiler alert, Solar falls over, so you have to do that kind of thing. It will fall over, there's no doubt about that. I've used Solar for on and off for about 10 years. And if there's one thing you know, it's Solar will dump its cores at the time you don't want it to. So you have to be ready at that point and quick to be able to put that back in, and we'll be able to do that. And then Solar's on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the, oh no, it isn't. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. We're back again. Thank you, Nick. So talking about the IATI, the API gateway. This is the portal. This is where you go to have a look at it. Please do go there. If you are a developer, have any interest at all in APIs, please do go to https://developer.iatistandard.org. That's the developer portal, and that's where you'll be able to get in and play around with the APIs. At the moment, just the Validator API. That's the only one up there, but it's there, ready to be played with. The more the merrier. Do come along. We'd love to see you there. Thank you, Nick. Eventually, the idea is for the API gateway, and again, this is a recommendation from the stocktake of last year, for it to be the eventual home for all supported public IATI APIs. Features industry standard API documentation. So if you're a programmer and you've used an API before, you'll feel at home there. And it also has a really great API testing tool, so analogous to a query building tool. It's a live tool. Nick will be showing you this later on, and you can make requests to your heart's content, build your queries, see the results coming back, and play around with it. Currently, we've got the Public Validator API in there since 13th of September, moving along nicely, no issues. And then the future will be the Data Store API, and then in the new year at some point, the Registry API. Once we move the Registry API, that'll be the first existing API we move behind the gateway. And the intention there is for it to go behind the gateway, but for there to be no difference in the way you use it. So it's exactly the same URL. There'll be no change for end users. But it will give us, as I said before, the advantages of analytics and the advantages of protection. Next slide, please, Nick. Right, this is a slide to lead you all to Nick's seminal performance in the last VCE of demonstrating that same API portal. So if the API portal is developer portal, sorry. So if you go there and you click play, you'll see Nick floating over a lake, as you can in the top right-hand corner there, and letting you all know exactly how that works. Thank you very much, Nick. Next slide. And so this is just a little bit of a chart to show what's happened so far. So we've been live for about a month with the API gateway. We've had, for the Validator API, about 1,000 requests from 21 countries, and you can see them all there, grouped largely in Europe, as you'd imagine, but outliers across the world, and a lot coming in from North America. And one you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner coming in from the middle of the ocean. So somebody is on a beautiful yacht with internet access, polling our API, and I think we all want to meet that person. Thank you, Nick. Next up, I think this is over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And yeah, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the first API that is available in the API gateway and on the IATI Unified Platform, and that's the Public Validator API. And so why did we decide to release this Public Validator API? And really at the end of the day, we wanted to improve data quality. And really the idea is to allow technically adept publishers that have some sort of technical pipeline and code to publish their data to be able to validate programmatically as well. Because as you may know, you can publish programmatically through the registry. So the idea here is being able to validate programmatically. And the idea too, in an ideal world, would be validating and then publishing so that we have the best quality data going into IATI and being published in IATI. So some of the features that we were looking for, and these are pretty general features, but we wanted it to be simple to use, fast. And to enable that, we decided on a synchronous API as opposed to an asynchronous API. So to demonstrate how that synchronous API would work in the case of the ad hoc validation route. So the user would send an IATI XML document in the body of the post request, and be able to wait and receive back a JSON formatted validation report, as opposed to an asynchronous API where you might send that body of XML data and then just get back a response from the server. Yep, we received it. Go look here to check if we're done processing it. And then you have to pull that other place and look in that other place to actually retrieve the report later on. Obviously, that's a bit more complicated to program. So that's why we decided on a synchronous API to really help us meet the requirements of making it simple and fast. We also have the other endpoint of retrieving existing validation reports. And by existing validation reports, I mean validation reports of published IATI documents. So the unified platform, as Alex was describing before, will grab the new documents from the registry, download those, and then run them through the validator so that they're available in the validator front end, but also now available through the API, the public API. And I'll go into a little bit more detail of how that works in a few slides. So the Public Validator API, getting into a little more detail on how you can use that, is it's available in the API gateway in the developer portal. And this is just a screenshot here of what that documentation looks like. There's a wealth of it there. I'd also just want to signpost you to a video link here from the last VCE, where we actually did a live demo of how you can test that and try it out in the developer portal. And not much has changed in terms of what that looks like. The main thing that has changed is the actual JSON response. But if you follow along with that video with the actual portal open on one screen and the video in the other, you'll be able to walk through the same steps and try it out. So I'm not going to repeat that here today. What I will show today is the Public Validator API existing report route. So the ability to get that existing report from published IATI data. And so in this case, you need to provide some sort of identifier, right, to the system so that we know which document you want to see the validation report for. And then the system, the API, will be able to respond with that validation report. So I'll go ahead and jump into the demo here. And so first of all, I want a data set that I want a validation report for. So I've gone to the registry website here, in the African Development Bank data and their Algeria file. And so what I need to determine, as I said, is the identifier for the document. So the easiest place to find that in the registry here I've found is this JSON option here. And you can see I chose Firefox for the browser because it formats the JSON very nicely. But you can see here that the ID that I was talking about, the hash and the URL are all available in there. I'm going to go ahead and just take the hash and copy that. It's you just need one portion of it. And then I'm going to head over to the developer portal in the API gateway. I'm already logged in as myself. And so, I have a exploratory subscription. I've requested an exploratory subscription, which requires no approval or anything. You can just get an account, sign up for that subscription, and ready to go and test. So now I'll go to the Validator API, and I'm on the existing report route. Now you can see that the post validate or the ad hoc validate route is another available selection here. You can get information about this route here in some open standards for APIs and download them right there if you'd like to import that into your own tool like Postman, for example. Or if you just like to peruse the documentation here, you can see things like a link to the GitHub repository, how to form the request, and then what request parameters that are available or required. So in this case, right, we need to give the API an identifier for the document, as I've talked about. So either the ID, the URL, and hash. And this documentation tells me how I should do that, how I should format it. You've also got information on the responses that you might receive from the API. So in the case that maybe you've missed adding one of those query parameters, the API will tell you that. Or maybe they can't find a report for that ID that you provided, it will tell you that as well. If a report is able to be found, then this details the what the JSON schema is and what the JSON will look like for that report that's been sent back. And now we'll actually try it out. So I can go right here to this nice green try it button. And because I've logged in and I have that subscription that is free to sign up for, and in this case for an exploratory one, automatically approved, I've got the subscription key is actually defaulted in here for me. And then I'm going to go ahead and in the parameters, put the hash in of that file. And I can see down here that the request is being formed for me. And I can actually view this in many different languages. If you're more familiar with something like using curl at the command line or JavaScript or Python, all available there. I can go ahead and actually send off this request from the tool. And I can see I've gotten a 200 OK response, which is great. And in the response body, I can see these are actually those identifiers that match with what I had seen in the registry. This is the hash that I provided. So I got the right validation report back. And then underneath the report key here is that whole validation report in the JSON schema that is detailed there. And if I go to the bottom here, I can see some of the more kind of high level information of that validation report, a summary of how many errors of each criticality I got, file type, this is an activities file, what version of the API was used to generate this file, what IATI version it is, and some other debugging information there as well. So that's a demo of the get an existing report route. And I'm going to go ahead and head back to the presentation now as that loads and talk a bit about still on the theme of Validator, but the Validator version 2. And so this is the new homepage of the IATI Validator. For those that are familiar and have used the Validator in the past, you can see it looks pretty much the same. As Alex said, we didn't fully rewrite or redo the front end as part of the version 2. We really just took the existing one, made some minor improvements, and there aren't a ton of actual visual changes or improvements there. A lot of the work that we did was behind the scenes in the back end with the unified platform. But what you can see is that along with the existing options of check data, which is being able to upload a file into the browser, IATI file, and have that validated, or doing public data viewing, so seeing validation reports for published IATI files. But now we've got this new option here too, so that our more technical or developer users can go right to the public API and find that right here from the homepage of Validator. So some of the improvements that we made, and as I said, not too extensive here, but main thing is that it's on the unified platform and really will help with things like knowing consistency consistently where the file is in that pipeline of being downloaded from the registry, validated. So we have information there, so that makes that clear. And in the past, we had some issues in terms of different systems setting timestamps in different ways. So it was kind of confusing at times to know where your file was in that and when it would be validated for that published data. And that should be very clear and consistent now. In terms of some of the additional visual improvements, we have some additional context information, like things like a line number, a column number for the errors provided. And that actually was part of the rewrite of the backend and actually the core validation logic with the Validator API that enabled us to add that and enhance that portion of the validator. The other piece, which I'll show on the next slide, is we added some additional status columns and color coding to help folks using the validator to be able to prioritize which files to look at and understand what kind of errors there are with each of their IATI files. So this page is part of what you would see if you had uploaded these 5 files here, and you can see that now we have this new validation status column with a key here to tell you, what is the status of that file in terms of its validation, if it's critical, if it has just some errors or just some warnings, or successfully has been validated and has no warnings, errors, or critical errors. And you can see too as well that there's also the clear columns in terms of when it was uploaded and validated. These don't help a ton because when you're doing an ad hoc, it's so fast that they end up being the same minute. But you can see that there's a difference between that. And as well as here, in this case, I would, if I'm uploading these files, I want to address the critical one first because that's the, has its worst errors. Also made the same improvement to the organization view page. So this is the page, if I was viewing all the files for a specific organization, we also have it sorted too as well, so that you'll see which of your files as an organization that you're publishing have errors, and those are the ones you need to address first and fix ideally, whereas the files that have successfully validated will be down below here as well. And then you can also see the columns that I talked about here when something was identified or in the registry and downloaded, and to when it was validated, and the next timestamp there as well. So that's really all I have in terms of changes to the front end for the Validator version 2. Welcome any feedback that you have on it and using it. I know we received a few bug reports in the first week, and we really appreciate that, and we're able to fix those quite quickly. Would love to hear from you on enhancements as well, and not just bugs. So you can either email our support or help desk, which is manned by our lovely business analysts, or engage on GitHub if that's more your thing. There's actually 3 different repositories as the components of it. And if you can't remember them, they're also here at the bottom right corner of the validator, a link to the actual GitHub release that you're seeing there at that time. And I'm going to hand it over now to Alex to talk a bit about the future.
Thank you very much, Nick. Yeah, I shall brief it because actually I think I've touched on it mostly beforehand. The immediate future and what we're concentrating at this point is on the data store API. So implementing that in the on the unified platform. Actually, majority of that work, the non-functional work, is done to the extent that obviously it's sharing a lot of the services that are there already. We've implemented Solar, got that up there. It's all in our CI/CD pipeline, so that's all happening. And we've got a prototype API which is working and working fast. So now it's a question of working with our product owner, who's doing a great job, Amy, keep us on the straight and narrow to get the feature set together and make sure we deliver there before the end of the year. Then the next thing will be publish a stats and dashboard. So moving that across from where it is at the moment and re-implementing that onto the unified platform, which will be quite a milestone really, because at that point, I think I'm right in saying we are unified. We no longer have outlying servers doing whatever it is that they happen to be doing at that time and falling over at the wrong times and that kind of thing. We'll be doing that in conjunction with thinking about the proposed data quality index as well, and seeing what kind of crossovers there are, and just making sure we don't repeat ourselves, basically. So that's the earlier part of next year. And then for next year, we've also got another project which we'd like to kick off, which we're calling the Technical Climate Impact Project. So what we're thinking is, how can we measure the climate impact of our services? Actually, not just our services, but any service on the internet, because this is the thing with all these platforms, especially on the cloud. Speed and efficiency comes at a cost, not just of money, but of energy. So we'd like to find ways of being able to build metrics of the impact of our services. Once we've got those metrics, we'd like to make those services more efficient. To reduce that impact, to reduce the energy cost. And of course, if you're reducing the energy cost, generally you're making the software more efficient and you're reducing the monetary cost. So unless you are Jeff Bezos and their ilk, there is no downside to that process. And then the result of it is a reduced climate impact of our services. And so that's something we're going to get going on internally with us. And then over the fullness of time, if and when we find a framework which is working there, then we'd really like to, turn that into a thing, make that framework public, and see if we can invite other people to come and join us and apply the same methodologies. So to be continued, and perhaps at the next VCE, we'll do a climate impact, technical climate impact talk, and concentrate on that. Yes, and that's about that. Nick, if you could slide us on. So yeah, thank you very much for your time and listening. And yeah, we can open it up for Q&A if you'd like. You're very welcome to not as well ask any questions. Either way is great. What we'd love you to do is come along to the IATI developer portal. Any programs out there, get in there, get on there, play with the APIs, give them a run for their money, try and break them, great. If you do break them, please tell us how you broke them and then we'll fix them for you. We hope you won't, because we hope it's a very resilient platform actually, and a good place for us to move on from here. I think that's a hand up. I'm not too au fait with this kind of thing. Mark, is that your hand up? You're on mute.
Hi, sorry, now I'm on mute. Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, so thanks a lot for the presentation. I was hoping in this session to hear more about the data store. I don't see any, I don't know if you can share kind of the link to the repository or the prototype. I don't see...
Not at this stage, though shortly. What we're working on at the moment is the API contract, which is going to be analogous to the V2 API contract. So hopefully support users in exactly the same way. At the point of which we've got that clear and ready to go, then we'll make that public. And that'll be the point that it's absolutely clear in our minds. Like I say, non-functionally, we're in a good position. We're serving up, but we've got the advantage of a lot of logs, both the old logs from old data stores and logs from the current traffic going to the data store. So, we can use that as a testing base, and we're in the upper 99% percentile of returning that stuff. So we're pretty confident we've got a robust system. The actual feature set, which, like I say, should be pretty much the same as the V2 feature set at this stage and on the unified platform. So with be able to move forward with that and add things on will be defined within the API contract. And yeah, like I say, we're working on that, and I would expect that to be available, you know, in the next, something like the next month or so.
I mean, yeah, so I guess a couple of things on this. I mean, so the intention is to deliver something by the end of this year still, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, then consulting sometime in the next month on what that thing should look like, right? I think is it's getting tight, right, in terms of making sure that that's actually kind of well,
Mark, you're absolutely right. It is tight. There's no doubt about that. And that the tightness, you know, there's plenty of historical precedent as to why the timescales are tight. And, you know, that's something that we're dealing with those timescales. What we don't want to do is get into any implementation specifics now, because what we don't like to do is make promises that we don't deliver on. I think what we have done this year, and is evidenced by the unified platform, you know, once we say there's an API contract, then we want to be confident that we can deliver that in the timescales that we say we do, which we did before. I think that in terms of, because the timescales are short, because we're getting something out, you're right, it's not ideal by any stretch of the imagination. We'd much prefer to be going at this in the same way we did with the Validator API, where we could take a long stretch at it. And we did a really great job with the Validator API, I think, certainly on, you know, Petcha, who's the product owner there, did a great job defining that. We went out and interviewed.
Alex, we've got to actually wrap things up because there's no break before the next session.
So in short, we'd have liked to have done it in that fashion. The way things are panning out, we can't. What we can do is take the version 2 and aim to deliver that back. And then from January onwards, when we're looking for, you know, for the next version, for version 4 or for version 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, adding features in and doing so in a more relaxed fashion where we can really get involved and find out precisely for the features people need. Thank you all very much. So we're wrapping up there. Thanks very much for coming along. Yeah, hope to see you all around.
And thanks so much for all the questions in the chat, and we'll find a way to get back to you on many of those. And if you don't hear back from us in a while, feel free to engage with us through the email or check out the developer blog. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.